So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to special edition of the online showings and the online podcasting. This is I Am Him 2, second edition of the I Am Him initiative. This is in celebration of International Men's Day. So to all the men in Trinidad and Tobago, the region and the world, we say and we acknowledge and salute you for all the important things you have done in manhood. So my name is Akin Samuel. I'm the owner, founder, and director of Andrew Sport and Entertainment Consultancy. I say good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on what part of the world you're in. And in celebration of International Men's Day, so as I said, this is a special podcast episode. So with me, I have my friend, my big brother, the social entrepreneur himself, an actor, director, producer, father, husband, man of God, gentleman who I look up a lot to in terms of for business and faith. I introduce to you my friend, my brother in Christ, Mr. Stephen Edmonds.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for all of those accolades. Just being your friend and a brother in Christ is an honor, bro. And I thank you for all that you have done and supported. And I want to congratulate you on your show and, your listeners and your viewers, whoever, follow your program. I wish them all the very, very best. So it's an honor to be here, man.
All right. So we're going to get right into it. And thank you again. There are so many ways we can go about this, but let's keep it as structured as possible and try not to go off the bandwagon as much, because sometimes when we both get together and we start to talk shop, we could go on for hours, right?
Yeah,
So
I promise, but I'll try.
it's all right. It's all right. It's all right. God first, everything else after. So in celebration of this day, and we see that given the climate of recent, that not much people know today is International Men's Day. Some people would not even know that it have an International Men's Day. Because you will have conversation with some persons and they would be like, it have something called International Men's Day. I was like, well, duh. If it have an International Women's Day, you'd expect it to have an International Men's Day. So my first question to you would be is, what does being a man mean to you?
Being a man, well, first to begin, to add to your point, I think it's a little more recognized than before. Because I got up this morning, albeit after 8, and I saw someone who I knew, a female, who sent me, Leslie, shout out to Leslie, uh, Happy International Men's Day. So I think it's getting a lot more recognition, and a lot more people are recognizing it. I don't think, I don't know who created the day, but I don't think that um, whoever does the planning or so really understands what it really is to be a man. To answer your question. And I was talking to my barber because I had to come on your show looking fresh. So big up to Coon. Um, but and and he was saying like, yeah, today is just like another day. Because I don't think people understand what it really is to be a man, to be a real man, and to be able to stand up for your values and keep your boundaries and keep that which that the honor honoring your word and the things that you said that you were going to do. Like just being a Christian. I don't think people understand what that really means. Trying to be faithful to God and faithful to your word. Meaning that there's a lot of, I mean, it's men talking. There's a lot of shit that comes men way that you have to shovel, that you have to eat, that you have to take, right? From men who might be less than you, who might just be in a position that, somebody gifted to them. And people don't realize the kind of difficulties men find themselves in when they're given their very best and things are not yielding the result that they would like. I gave an illustration to somebody who did very, very well in exams. And I said to them, I said, imagine you were going to school, right? And this is a university graduate. And they finished top of the class, right? Imagine that you were going to school and you were studying really hard for this exam and you got all the answers right. You did everything that you were saying. And then at the end of the exam, they give you an F. There's no way to query the F. There's no way you just have to retake the exam until you get an A. That is best describes what a man being a man is. Because you could do all the right things. You could do all the things that, that you're supposed to do. And still, the result that you're looking for is not the result that you'd want. And you have to do that over. You have to work harder at it. You have to try new strategies, learn new strategies, and go back at it again. And still, you would fail. And still, sometimes, and you just have to wait until it happens and it clicks for you. And then you realize, okay, well, and at the end, and while you're doing that exam or while you're working towards that goal, you have a whole heap of people watching in the exam room and it's like, you can see how we done see, you can see how we can't pass the exam, you can see how, and the minute you pass that exam, those very same people are going to look at you and be like, yeah, boy, I always had faith in you, You was my real friend, and everybody's gonna rush you at that door now with their hand out, looking for an opportunity, right? And these are the same people who are just shitting on you. And you had to be able to watch that and just smile and go on. Because part of being a man is really, you had to take the high road because you have to understand that we all in a society where we are programmed to think a certain way. We are programmed to believe a certain thing. We are programmed to operate in a certain way. And if you go against the grain, even though it's the key to success, a part of that cost is, taking a lot of that critique, a lot of that criticism, a lot of that, and people who have no idea, how to do what you're doing or how to get to where you want to go has the most advice. So being a man is not an easy thing at all. There's this video that I saw where they were asking the men, if you had a chance, and the Grim Reaper came right now and they said, take take me or take my wife. And they asked like five men, and all five men said they will obviously take me, leave my wife. And they asked five women, and the five women said, take my husband. Why should I die? And it's the reality of what men face. Men have to die all the time, die to a whole heap of things, take a lot amount of disrespect, and you still have to keep on going. So I think, especially in this space of mental health and that kind of stuff, those are really, really buzzwords. But what is mental health for men is not the same as mental health for women.
Exactly.
It's not the same. And I think that, these words and these days that people come up with is like, you ask any man, any average man about International Men's Day, and they will quickly tell you, forego International International Men's Day, just have a day where you treat me right, where you treat me fairly, where you really listen to what I have to say, where you really treat me like I'm a human being and not for the position that I am in life. Because, you know, it's easy for a man to go from hero to zero.
Exactly.
Alternatively, it's easy for a man to go from zero to hero. And I always say the same people who said, Hosanna, Hosanna on Palm Sunday were the same people who were saying crucify him on Easter Sunday, on Good Friday.
Mm.
But
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and yes, our guest is back in right
yeah,
here.
okay,
Um,
cool.
so we were speaking about acceptance of being a man and the different struggles that we face.
Right.
So we understand that you gave a thorough example of what being a man is. So what does it mean? Okay, let me phrase it this way. Being a man of the world and being a man in Christ is two different things.
Yeah.
And the more that you go through this journey, you begin to understand that as much as you may want to do certain things, what God calls you to do is sometimes it goes against everything, every fiber in your body. So
Yeah.
my question to you is yes, you gave an example of being a man. And
Mm.
we always, well, for me, I always try to keep things grounded in Christ as much as possible. Being a man in Christ, what does that mean to you?
Well, you have a different rule book, and you have to understand that. And you have to understand the rule book to the point where certain things, you know, don't bother you the way that it would bother you anymore. And that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of relationship, right? Because what a man in the world could do, you can't do to get ahead. What you have to understand that because you're operating with different rules, it doesn't mean that you can't get ahead, but you get ahead by different means, right? So he plays with a different rule book, and then you have to now say, okay, if this is the rule book that you're playing with, how does and my rule book is also a guidebook. So I get a guide on how to counteract those things. And so when you're a man of the world, there are certain it's not like the principles in the Bible wouldn't work for you. Principles are principles regardless, so
Mhm.
whoever apply them.
Okay.
All of us, experience gravity, whether you're a Christian or not. If you jump off a building, you're surely going to die, right? So the principles are the same, but the rules are different. And therefore, the way that you operate, the way that you conduct yourself is different. And so you have to now be in an emotional space. I think the emotional capacity as a man who's Christian is totally different. You have to gain a much greater emotional capacity because it's natural for you to want to cuss somebody out. It's naturally for you to say, hey, your mother so and so, but you understand? But you can't. And for you, you have to, there's a story in the Bible where there were some little children harassing David. And the guy, Joab, who was kind of like David's right hand man, I think, don't quote me on this one, but he was going to he was going to tell the children, discipline the children, and the story goes that David says, leave them. Perhaps God will see the wrong that was done to me, and he will avenge me. And those children get eaten by a wild beast afterwards. No, it's not fair. I
Yeah,
never,
the Bible is
I never
wild, though.
said, I
No,
never
I
said,
understand.
I
The
never
Bible
said
was.
it was a bedtime story, right? But the whole point is like, he could have easily let Joab handle it. But there are certain things that he knew that as a man of God, he had to leave, So it's those kinds of things that you have to just see, you know, God God has to deal with that, but and it's hard to leave that alone. It's hard to be disrespected. It's hard to be, you know, told the worst of things, and sometimes you just have to smile. But inside of you, you know, like for instance, I am a very kind person, but I'm not nice. I'm kind, and there are two different things. I
Exactly.
do have the capacity to cuss somebody out and punch them in their face, right? But I don't because I'm kind, but I'm not nice. And therefore, you know, it calls on you as a man of God to be kind many times, even though you might have the capacity to really get back at somebody, to just leave them and say, well, you know, probably God would see.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, you know, you have to look at those same people and watch, you know, when it's time to pay the bill, you feel sorry for them, and you yourself had to pray for them people. So it's different. The rule books are different, but the nice thing about having that rule book is that it's a rule book and a guidebook. You know?
Yeah, man. So, in my journey in Christ, I'm beginning to understand that even more, especially that being kind part. Because boy, oh boy, the people has come out for you plenty times, and
Yeah,
you really have to have the, as you rightfully put it, um, from a worldly standpoint, an emotional maturity, a spiritual
yeah,
emotional maturity to
yeah,
understand it. Just have certain things you have to leave be.
yeah.
'Cause,
And you do. Otherwise, otherwise, you know, I mean, it makes you no different. You know, what I mean, and it's not a label. So that's one of the things that I don't really do. You know, what I mean, it's not a label to say, well, I. It's easy for people to say, I believe in this or I believe in that. It's totally different to live it. And most persons, and again, being that's what being a man is, living what you say.
mm,
Yeah,
yes, man. Simple as that. Make a yes be yes, and you know
and you know, be no.
you know. Um, we have known each other for quite a while, more than
Yeah.
probably going on about 15 years. And
Yeah, don't tell people my age now, man.
I never said nobody
My
age.
ass, my ass old, yes. But
Right?
it does look fine.
That's all right. Yeah, you have it on point. You have it on point.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You have it on point. It's a look that you that look that you have there. You have mastered that look now, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
That's actually my logo. Hmm.
right. So um, being a man and marrying it with the word of God, and always doing your best to put the word of God first in everything that you do, whether it be your family and especially your business. And I know you put a lot into both of those things, those elements, your family and business. So what I would talk about now, what I'll ask you about now is your business, the business side of being a man. Um, you have seen many ups and downs, and your journey now in business is much different as it were 10 years ago, because it's
Yeah.
something you constantly remind me of and encourage me to be better. What is it like being a man in business, and more so being a man of God in business?
Okay, so that that if I have to sum up that question, is just being a man of purpose. Really and truly, you must know what your purpose is in this life. You know, you could get into any kind of business. You could do anything for money. Shit, you could do OnlyFans. You understand? But that mean that's not your purpose. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm sure I could get a good chubby, a good following for persons who like the the chubby ball look on OnlyFans. But that's not my purpose in life. You know, and I think the thing about it is that we do all of these things, even if it's not in business, even if it's a career, we do all of these things and separate it from our purpose, thinking that your purpose is your sideline, where it should be the opposite way. Your purpose is that main thing. It's that thing that you're supposed to be doing. It's that thing that you've been called here on earth to do that only you could do. And others are waiting for you to do what only you could do. So they can also have an opportunity to do what only they can do. So when you delay your purpose for distractions, which might be another job or or a business that is not really what it is you're called to do, you also not just playing with your destiny, but the destiny of others. So one of the things that I really try to do as much as possible in business is do my business. Not all money is good money, and not all things that will benefit you, right? Is for you. It might benefit you for a time, and I see a lot of people who talk about hustle and grind, right? And hustle and grind in many ways is like working now for immediate result. And so what happens like when you hustle and grind is like, okay, if I had some blocks like this, right?
Mhm.
I say I had some blocks like this, right? And I said, I mean, I want you to hustle and grind and is putting these blocks on top of each other as fast as I can. But that could only get to probably about 5 or 6 heights until it topple over. If I started putting the bricks like this, sideways, and putting them next to each other, and putting them in a pattern that it makes a much bigger base, I could go 3 stories high. The problem is that most times persons who are on the hustle and the grind, putting the bricks one on top of the other, and um, you could only reach that far because after that your stack falls. Whereas this person, although he may not get up as fast, he may not get to the 6 height brick as fast as you are, but he can go to 3 stories high. Um, and that's a huge difference in the way that when you operate your business within your purpose, and then you can start branching out into other things because you clearly define what your purpose is and what it is you align your business with that, but there are business principles that you have to learn. So for instance, a big part of what I realized I was doing wrong is like I always wanted to sell what I wanted to sell, and I learned later is that you have to sell what people are buying, and then they trust you enough that they will buy what you want them to buy. But at the beginning, you have to sell what people are buying. And that was very difficult for me to understand. And I think that was one of my biggest mistakes, let's say 10 years ago. So when I look at myself now and I see the business model that I do now, I mean, the value that I can bring to someone now is a lot more because I'm a lot more informed. I have a lot more information that could help them get to where they want to go. So it's a huge difference in the way that you conduct business.
Yeah, I am getting that lately as well. Because through seeing certain things that you did and do that brought you success, that even brought you failure, made me understand as well that I have to improve in what I do and how I go about doing it. Whether it be in sport, whether it be in entertainment. Um, just recently, posting the poster for the movie, and
Right.
one of my performing art colleagues in bold captions put "about time," because
Mm-hmm.
you're getting to realize that, as you said with the blocks, you gotta hustle and keep, and as your things collapse, you start over. It collapse, you start over. But if you understand sometimes the sacrifice of doing it well and doing it properly within the purpose, you would see
Yeah,
the results. It may take longer, but you would
yeah,
see results and the results would last. It's not
yeah,
a temporary success,
yeah.
and it leads me into another aspect is that many young persons, especially of this get rich quick scheme, if you want to put it, that this 1 in 100,000 ratio, um, whereby they believe that I just could be an influencer or a streamer and make money. Right? I'm not saying that you can't, but
Hmm.
the reality of it is understanding how to do it. So, what would you advise a young man if he's sticking on business, if you decide to go that avenue?
Well, there's nothing wrong with getting rich quick.
Mhm,
You know, being rich is really a rate, is a speed, right? So,
mhm,
okay, for instance, I could have made $1 million, you could have made $1 million, right? But it took you 10 years to make $1 million. It takes me 4 months to make $1 million, right? I am so much more richer than you because even though we have the same amount of money, the time that it took me to make my million, right, is much less than yours, right? So that'll come like something like I'm probably about 250 or 2,500% richer than you if you check out the percentage, right? Um, so there's nothing wrong with getting rich quick, right? The problem is that what gets you rich quick is mastery. And the thing about it is that it takes time to master certain things. So I could say that, okay, a young man dedicating next 4 years of his life to any particular craft that somebody needs, that a large amount of people need and be willing to pay for, right? Let's take, for instance, as you said, an influencer, right? But let's say it's social media management. And this person understands the dynamics of how things work. They stay on top of of things in terms of like how things change in the algorithms and all of these things. They are mastering that craft. That person don't have time to watch TV. That person don't have time to go out online. That person don't have time to, so I hardly go out because the thing about it is that you and I could sit down and watch all of Usain Bolt's greatest races within 2 minutes because he spent like about what 9 seconds per race, right? Ten
mhm.
seconds. So let's say he had 12 winning races or Olympics, right? We could watch all his Olympic runs in under 5 minutes, right? Do we understand the years that it took him to train to be able to do that? And that's the thing is like we watch people's performances, but we don't watch their preparation and the work that is needed to prepare to you to be able to master a skill or skills because it'll be more than one. You might be very good at social media, but you also have to be good at speaking. So one of the things that I did recently is I recently joined Toastmasters, right? Shout out to Rima Toastmasters. Um, because I found that I want to speak on international stages. I want to get on a private jet and be able to speak all over the world. If I am to do that, I have to be able to be in an environment where I can train myself and give myself the opportunity and the best chance to do so and learn new skills. I'm a fairly okay speaker, but even learning the basics of how to prepare a speech, how to practice a speech, I have seen the improvement in my speech when I have a practice speech as opposed to, and I'm an actor. So I can make a practice speech sound fresh, right? Like it just came out. But I've seen the improvement in my abilities in this just a little time that I have been there. And that's a skill that I now have to master. But the thing about it, people don't want to master skills. So there's nothing wrong in wanting to get rich quick. But you have to be willing to pay the price. And that's the thing that people aren't willing to do. They are not willing to pay the price to master a skill. They are not willing to pay the price to do the things that, are necessary to become successful. You can't watch TV. You can't be schooling on TikTok. You can't be on the internet just watching anything hairy fairy. I mean, everybody that I generally follow on Instagram is some influencer has something to teach. I'm a big fan of Alex Hormozy, Myron Golan. Those are the persons that I get a lot of my information from. So the thing about it is that to answer your question, yes, you can get rich quick, and you ought to. That should be the aim.
Mhm.
But don't look at the results and not look at the preparation and the price for it. Be willing to pay the price to be able to be successful. Be willing to pay the price. It means sleepless nights. It means plenty times I would go to bed 4 o'clock and get up at 7, and I've been doing that for years. I have to slow down now because I'm not as young as I used to be. And many times you're doing that for years, and I would say within only the last 2 years, I got the difference of, certain things that would work. But I didn't understand that in all the time that I was doing those things, I was mastering certain things. So for me to do a show, for me to direct a movie, I've mastered those things. And mastery doesn't mean that you know everything, but you could do it at a subconscious level. So even as an acting coach, I've coached so many people over the years, and I used to wonder why am I doing all of this? Why? But I see it now. I see it now when I have to coach a cast, and I could hear certain things. You know, because I've mastered it. I've spent the time and put in the work to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, then forget about getting rich quick.
Fair enough. Well, I agree. I agree and concur with that. That's why I particularly phrased the question that way, so
Hmm.
viewers could get to understand. There's nothing wrong with wanting money or getting
No,
money.
it's absolutely not.
Nothing wrong with that. And many persons in the world, even as God-fearing men and kingdom men, are continuously striving to be kingdom men. We have been conditioned to believe that wanting or needing financial freedom is seen as evil and is seen as worldly. And how would you explain that to a young man that in Christ, a young man
Mm,
in Christ, or someone trying to come to Christ and the
mm.
pursuit of it? And that is something that raises its head a lot in kingdom principles when it comes to money. That they have this notion that Christian people had to be poor.
Yeah, you see that I think okay, so that's not that's a popular it's a popular notion, but it's not a biblical one. And if we stick to the Bible, right, a lot of those things are really happen through like different religions that came up, but it's not a biblical principle. And the Bible is full of principles, poems, practices, different things like that. And so that is not biblical because there are two things. When you listen to the story of the Good Samaritan, right? The reason why the Samaritan was good was because he could have go and pay the guy hospital bill and say, if he when he's here, if he overstays or whatever the case might be, I would pay the bill when I come back. That means he has to have a good name. He had the ability to pay, right? The Bible talks about a man with money has many friends. The Bible also mentions about gold, what I mean, and it says Abraham was a friend of God, and he wasn't just rich, he was very rich, as Myron would always say. So those, anytime people start talking about that, those aren't really biblical principles, but those are things that have been parroted from generations. And that's why I have a serious problem with the school system, where school was designed to really make it think a certain way. You know what I mean? And it doesn't open up your opportunities and your abilities to think in ways that are very analytical, right? Because in all fairness, school wasn't designed for that. School was designed to really recreate factory workers. And anybody who watching this and want to look it up, it's a fact. It was designed to create factory workers, and it was also designed to make people submissive. So it was a way that people will not, because if you look at the way that we think, you know, a lot of people are afraid to fail. And what is failure? Failure is not getting the outcome that you set out. So you know that, okay, if you don't write this particular thing in the paper, you won't get an A. And your aim is always to get an A, not to really write the best paper possible, right? Sometimes you're hoping that they are congruent, but many times in life you'll find that it's not, right? And failure is what we consider to be failure is really a learning tool. If it weren't for the thousand failures, the light bulb would not have been created. If it wasn't for the so many crashes, nobody would have been flying a plane. So this is a part, and we are never taught this. We are never taught that this is a part of the process. We are taught that, okay, you make a mistake, you see you get X, you dummy, right? Why you do that? You know what I mean? You get this wrong, and so even the way that we live our lives, we harp on the things that are wrong. We harp on the things that weren't done good, and it really ruins our relationships. It ruins the way that we relate to other. It ruins the way that we even look at men, because men now are not, coming back to the whole point, men are not able to experiment and to do things the way that, because we are all just trying to figure this stuff out. Nobody has all the answers. So
Exactly.
failing and falling on your face is part of the process of you going from good, better to best. And if you're not willing to do that, because there are some people are genuinely, afraid of failure. What if I start this podcast and it only have two people? What if I only start this podcast and nobody shows up? Then show up anyway. I mean, look at you. You end up getting. I can't remember. I mean, and this is not a knock on you. I can't remember you ever having more than 10 persons on your life, right? And from this live, you were able to bring down some of the top wrestlers in the world, right? And be a part, and start a whole new company that gotten recognition in PlayStation. Now people will watch those things, and how many people could see that? And you see,
True.
this is what pisses me off, because not every time we always look at the monetary value of things, right? And and deem something a success or a failure because of its monetary value. And that is something I had to learn, and I actually learned that from my youngest sister. I remember at times she was saying, Stephen, why you reinventing yourself? Why you've accomplished so much? And for me, that was important to hear, because I've been led to believe that my all my accomplishments have been nothing, because there weren't all these financial riches to accompany it. And what happens then is that you stop doing, you stop trying, you stop going, you stop believing in yourself. And when you listen to all the entrepreneurs, it's like it's just one thing that broke through. But
Again,
it was the one thing that broke through, because I was doing it 1,000 times. I was doing this podcast, so many times, and you don't know who watching this podcast or who may see this over. You understand? So those are the things to me, when you're talking about, the biblical principles, we use those words conveniently. But in terms of who we are as men, as when you talk about money being evil, that's a cultural premise and it's not a biblical one. Because trust and believe, the devil has as much money as he has to wreak havoc in this world. And if Christians would only have the kind of money that we required, a lot of the evil in this world would not have been able to have happened. Because people have so much money that we can't hold them accountable. But when you have money and I have money, right? And I have the resources to say, hey, no, this is not how this is going to go. There's a story where in the Bible where Abraham's nephew Lot gets kidnapped by these kings. And Abraham, as a businessman, went with his servants and, rescued his son and five other kings from from these guys who would have abducted his nephew, right? He could he could not have done that if he wasn't very rich. And even when he rescued the guys, the kings wanted to give him money and he said no. He said just in case that, I mean, you go out saying that you made Abraham rich. Now, how much of a baller you had to be that
Yeah,
five kings giving you money and you could tell them, nah, I have money.
I
You
am on.
understand what I'm
I agree.
saying? I have money. Yeah, I mean, that is, as we say, that way call FU money. You know what I mean? So it's like this notion of we having to be poor, right, leaves us very, very desolate and to the mercy of a lot of things in this world. And I think it's a shame because many people are looking for the Christian voice, especially men, to stand up and say, protect us. Stand up and say, you know, you need to be there for us, and we can't because we don't have the finances. And the thing about it is that for those of us who are trying to make our way to get the finances, those very same Christian men or people who say that money is the root of all evil, they tear us down. And those are the ones that we would help first. Yeah.
Should I, wise words there, Stephen. So we we are talking about money and finances, and many people, it comes down to a few things you touched on. Um, Knowledge and understanding about finances,
Yeah.
fear, which is a very big part of it. I do think those two things play a very hefty part when it comes to getting, keeping, and spending, right?
Right.
And you also touched upon something there at the end, which is going to lead to my next question. Um, the Christian men stepping up and having the voice and protecting the people, and persons not understanding the hardships of walking that road, right? To just have the voice to say, don't do that, right?
Mm.
So leading that now into family, you know, well, I'm not married, nor do I have children,
Mm.
right?
Right.
But I understand from a man's perspective, I understand certain things when it comes to success, happiness, um, chaos, communication, the general consensus of those things that a man has to go through. But
Right.
how does that pertain to family as a man when it comes to finances, when it comes to faith, when it comes to God, how does that apply to family from your perspective as a man?
Mm. Well, that in terms of, so I would say to any young man who is getting married or thinking of getting married, understand that the single most important choice that you would make in your life is the wife that you have, right? your wife could make you twice the man that you could be, or half the man that you are. And it's very, very important that you have the wife that will, if this is what you want to do, you know, what I mean, will support that, because both of you all can't be the two people, you know, working to midnight. Well, you can't, you know, what I mean, it all depends on the kind of sacrifice that people are willing to make, right? But the thing about it is that as a man, you need that support. You need that person to say, "Hey, you know, I've got you. I have you. You know, I believe in you. You know," and that gives you the win, because you can't fight the world and you can't fight home at the same time. It's be
Correct.
too much. You see, right? So if you're in a situation where you have to fight the world and you have to choose one of those fights, right? And oftentimes, you know, you see men who choose to, I wouldn't fight the world, and uh, um, so I will, you know, the best situation to be in is to not have to choose, because you only have one enemy and your family is behind you. And, you know, I mean, you look at any kind of family dynasty. In my case, like in entertainment, you look at the Wayans brothers, you look at, you know, those guys who will band together and come together. You watch the sons and the generations now, you know, working and producing. But you look at any family when they stick together, right? Um, you see it a lot in the Spanish communities where you have four families living in a house and everybody sharing, you know, amenities and that kind of stuff. But before you know it, they could buy that house and then they move across to probably the neighbor, and you know, two families across there now, and we, you know, that's the way it's really supposed to be. So they never really should honestly be that battle. But in this modern time, in this time of, you know, I would say this culture of we not wanting to sacrifice, we want everything now. You know, I've been working for so many years and I'm tired now. You know, it's different and it's difficult. So you find, like, you know, a lot of men who are having to deal with that now prefer to kind of stay by themselves. And it's unfortunate because it's breaking up the family. But what is the alternative? Let's say if you have two sides of that coin, right, which I hope that nobody ever has to be in that situation. The alternative is to live a mediocre life and live the life that you wouldn't call to be. But you're cog in a wheel, and eventually you get to the point where you're so frustrated you can't even make out who you are. And for some people, that's fine, you know, and they can live that. You know, unfortunately, I'm not one of those people, you know, and and so anytime, you know, that decision has to come, unfortunately, you know, I mean, I just can't. I, you know, I've tried it and I feel like as like a Mustang in a ranch, just you know, and I start kicking against the doors. So you kind of have to know that this is how you're made up. And so if you're a young man thinking about having a family, you know, and you want to really be the most that you can be, you have to make sure that the person that you do marry sees that and is willing to walk that walk with you. Because then there will always be turmoil. There will always be turmoil. You know, I've been studying the book of Judges for quite a while. And one of the reasons why Samson was the way he was is because Samson was a warrior and the Israelites were shepherds. And to be so strong and to be so competitive and combative and not have a war to fight was one of the most frustrating things for him. So, you know, it was easy for when Delilah came on the scene for him to be swayed, you know, because it's really wasn't who he was. And I think, like, the biggest thing was like when the Philistines came for him and the Israelites themselves tied him up and gave him to the Philistines because they were afraid. And unfortunately, we have a lot of that happening right now, where men are being tied up and given to the enemy because we're afraid. So I really don't have no simple answer for that one. That
That's
one
all
really,
right.
and I'm transparent with those things. That one is really a struggle that I struggle with because for me, it's like, this that I'm doing is going to benefit all of us. At the end of the day, I my best illustration is this, right? What if Noah, let's say, take for instance, Noah's wife was seeing the neighbor getting new clothes and everything, and she was like, Noah, look at Mary. Mary have a new dress. Mary get a new food. They get a new leopard. They get a new right, and every day she's in Noah's ears, and Noah decides, okay, I want to make my wife happy. So I'll stop building this ark, right? And go out and, get food and get these different things to make sure that my wife is happy. And then the rains come and Noah doesn't build the ark. What happens then? Everybody dies. His children, his wife, everybody dies because he didn't, heed the call to God and do what was necessary. So it's important that you do have that support. If I don't think if Noah didn't have the right wife, that they would have been able to survive the storm. So
True.
that's my answer
No,
on
no,
that one.
no. True. It's true. It's it's not intentionally a loaded question, but as again, it pertains differently depending on who the man is, right?
Mm.
Um, so you touched on a very important point there in terms of being understanding the part of Noah.
Mm.
As again, I just going on what the message is coming into me because
Mm.
this is not actually this is not how I had the interview planned and structured, but
Mm.
it is what it
So
is.
yeah, I try.
No, 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 no. No, it's not that. It's just that the messages that coming in from God is that
Mm.
you're just hitting certain things and it leading into how it needs to be led. So
No
in a
problem.
way, it
Right.
is working.
Right.
You touched on a part with Noah, and a big part for me with the story of Noah is discipline, right?
Yeah.
This is discipline, right? And everybody just talk about obedience when it
Mm.
comes to Noah. But for me, I see
Yeah.
discipline as a big
Yeah.
part of Noah. Because when they talk
Mm.
about the ark, most people, the story of Noah, it makes it look like Noah built that boat in 3 months. But,
Yeah.
but it took him years.
Yes. Yes.
It took him
Yeah.
years to do it.
Yeah.
It had no power tools and them thing back then.
Yeah. Correct.
So that is
Correct.
hard, brutish
Hard.
manual labor. Brutish
Yeah.
manual labor. You're
Yeah.
talking about things like stone and them thing and knocking and you're building
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you have sons. One is a pastor and one is a soon to be prophet in his right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have big boys now. You have a
Yeah.
man and you have a soon to
Mm.
be man, right?
Yeah.
They ain't babies anymore. Um, an important part for me that I do believe in teaching young men is the discipline. And discipline has many faces. How I see it is this: you can either be a sheep, a wolf, or a sheepdog. A sheep meaning Now, biblical principles to a sheep is totally
Mm.
different from what I'm going to say here.
Yeah, yeah.
A sheep
Mm-hmm.
meaning a coward, a wolf
Mm.
meaning a bully, and
Mm-hmm.
a sheepdog meaning one who stands up for what is right. So on those
Right.
two principles there, how important is it for a man to teach his sons that? And how do you
Oh,
continue going about that?
it's extremely important. But you know, it's so funny. I was explaining to somebody yesterday about that. The cost of that is that you're not very liked. And 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 as a man in your own family, you would want to be liked. But again, a man always have a price to pay that nobody else really understands. You understand? Um, a man has to be the person that nobody really wants to hear. You know, I I had a little conversation with my son the other day. You know, he had this dog, this new dog, and you know, I told him, telling him about the responsibility of the dog. It's a responsibility that you choose, and if you choose this, then there are certain things that you have to do. It wasn't a conversation that he liked, but it was a conversation that I had to have. Now you're in a home where, you know, there. I'll give you a simple example. When everybody else is watching television, I am working, right? When everybody else is going out, I am working. And people talk about balance, but life isn't about balance, it's about seasons. And this is my season to work. There's going to be the time when I'll have my season to play. But in this season right now, I need to work. And it's important that we as the older men teach the young men that you have to understand that your season, what season you're in. And unfortunately, we have an education system that keeps children for a much longer time. And then we have persons who basically um, are now, so for instance, like in the Jewish culture, when you're 14, you're bar mitzvah, right? You're now able to stand for the decisions that you make. That being said, if you don't teach young men discipline and accepting responsibility, they are going to go out there and get slaughtered because, okay, so it may not happen in the short term. So they might go to school and they might do well. But that same person who doing well, right, and going to school and working for a company could have owned the company that they're now working for, but now are selling their skills and their services to make millions of dollars for this company when they could have been making it for generations to come. And so there's a lot of stuff that you would want to teach your sons that sometimes they're just not ready for. And sometimes I have to leave it and say, well, all right, you know, life will teach you. But as a father, it's not nice knowing that you are the person that nobody likes, but you love everybody more than they could ever know. You know, you hear so much about a mother's love, but think about God is our father. Think about God, the Father's love and how He operates, right? God will never force Himself onto you. And so, as a father, you could only say, but you know, I mean, when you watch how your children receive what you have to say, or receive even you in a room and you feel as though you're rejected, you have to shelve that away and say, shit, that. I have to tell you what and I have found myself, and you know, I mean, I've been a father for some years now. I've found myself over the past couple of years because we've had some really rough spots in my family, wanting to be liked so much that I would forego being a father. And a father is not liked, and I have to understand, but that's the job that I took. When you know, I look some of the things that my father told me, and my father and I were always at loggerheads. And now I'm 40 something, and now I see the value of what he was trying to tell me. But I couldn't see it then. And so you only understand how, I want to say this the right way, you only understand how ungrateful a son you are until you become a taken for granted father.
Okay.
Because fathers do the most. They will put their life on the line for everybody else. You know, they will face ridicule, they will face, but still be willing to tell them, hey, listen, I made this mistake, so you don't have to. And you watch your sons watch you like you're crazy, and you know, go ahead and do the very same thing, and then you just have to leave them because life will teach much more than you can ever see. But it's an unfortunate thing because you really didn't want for them to have to experience that, you know. So sometimes, you know, and my biggest fear as a father is that I'm right about some of the things that I see. Because if I'm right about the things that I see, then the toll or the payment that my sons have to pay, right, is going to be really harsh and really hard. Because I could see certain dangers from way in advance. And I could say to you, hey, listen, you see that? Don't do that. But you could always say, as they rightfully say, they're young men. They're young men. And a part of my job is to train them to be, you know, in my absence. You know, how you behave in my absence. I don't care what you do in my presence. In my presence, I am there in my presence. So I could hold it up. So when parents are always so overprotective and always want to be in the presence of their children, understand that how they behave in your presence have absolutely nothing to do with the kind of
Exactly.
human being that they'll be. It's how they behave in your absence.
Exactly.
And and that's what you're raising your children for. So a good father would not be liked. He will not always be adored. He will not always be the one to, you know, that everybody finds fun. But if he's doing what he needs to do, then he's doing his job. And that's what you
Mhm.
sign on for. You kind of sign on,
Exactly.
you know, for many. You won't be appreciated and you won't be liked until much later, though. And then, unfortunately, sometimes so much time has passed that you can't recoup it. Because as a father, one of the things that you have to do is go as far as you could. And this is another thing that I see, like, you know, culturally is changing. A lot of persons now, like when they make children, they invest everything in their children and say, well, all right, I will stop here now and invest everything in my children. Now, what you're teaching your child is to stop evolving, stop growing, stop being. Let my boys catch up to me and then pass me. But I'm not going to stop growing. I'm not going to stop being. I'm not going to stop becoming great because as I become great and you have to catch up to me and surpass me, then you have to be something that is going to be extra special. But by me shrinking my life and being small for you to grow great, I'm not doing you a favor because the world is going to come at you with a force that is so powerful, that is so strong, and you will be like, I wasn't prepared for this. So, no, you're going to have to catch up with me, and then me, overtake me. And then when life does come, you can stand up. You know what I mean? Like my younger son, I remember when he was playing basketball. I said, like, there will never be a defender who will defend you as hard as I am. So you should never be afraid to go on to the
Exactly.
rim because
Exactly.
you're not going to find a defender that's going to be rougher than me. You're not going to find a defender that's going to be stronger than me. I could see that. But then if I just continue to get fat and do come on the court and do train or whatever the case might be, then you know what I mean, then what am I? I'm not doing him a favor. So it's best for me to be the best version of who I am. Get to the very pinnacle of where God has put me top and say, okay, you go from here now. Think about the kind of generations if every parent would do that for their child. How great this world would be. So yeah, that's my take on fatherhood.
Yeah, man. Come on, Stephen. No, nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that. You understand? Even in my journey with my father, I'm beginning to understand certain things. The way he did it, and there are a lot of principles that my father taught me that I still stand on, and I'm not going to budge on it. And as I said,
Yeah,
sometimes you're just not going to be liked, and it's something you have to accept. You don't like me? All right,
yeah,
let's keep it moving. All right?
yeah, yeah.
So we see we're gonna wrap up soon. We
No,
see
it's up to you. It's your show, brother. So I
yeah, no,
guess
no,
as long
no,
as you have.
no, no, no. We're gonna wrap up soon. Just I think I have one more main question, and it's about abuse. We see a lot of young men, not just young men, but men of past, transitioning to young men of today. Is that there's an emotional imbalance that we don't know how to express ourselves properly, one, and two, there isn't a safe space to express ourselves properly um,
Right.
in quantity. And you see
Hmm.
abuse being happening when we abuse ourselves and then we abuse others, whether it be children, whether it be our wives, whether it be our parents. So what advice would you give to a young man? It
Right.
culminates into the closing up. What advice would you give to a
Okay.
young man on those things, on emotional stability?
Right. So there are a couple of things there, right? But you know what's funny, and this is something that I see happen all the time. You talked about abuse of children. You talk about it, but you didn't talk about men being abused, and that's something that we totally take out of our mind, that a man can be abused, that a man can suffer, whether it be mentally, sometimes even physically, um, from abuse. And we do talk about those things. So I'll talk about the safe spaces just now, but I want to address that instance of abuse because, you know, sometimes we as men experience certain things, or we hear people talk to us and say certain things about us that we know that, one, we've been sometimes lied on, sometimes we've experienced things that are just not true. And then the other thing is that we don't get to have a human experience, meaning that we might might not be good at something, or we have been not good at something, but given the opportunity to improve. And I think as a young man, there's a thing that says, it's called the zitarata, right? It's a set of Latin sayings, but they say it beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. And understand that as a young man, you will make mistakes, but it has to be within the context of a wholesome discipline. You must be disciplined in what you do. You must be disciplined in what you say. You must be disciplined in the way that you interact with each other. And we talk about emotion, and sometimes there's we talk about not being able to express ourselves, but we also have a big situation where boys express themselves just a little too much. You understand? And it's not in a healthy or right way. Because as a man, sometimes you have to know how to master your emotions. And that's what many times makes the difference between an average man and a great man. being able to master your emotions. Yes, this is how I feel, but I will not act on the way that I feel. If I act on the way that I feel many times, I could land somebody up in hospital. So it's not just about a stifling of emotions, right? But it's also a control of emotions. For those men who have emotional, who have been stifled emotionally or have things that they want to say and haven't had the opportunity, I'm a big advocate of counseling. It's important that you see a psychologist. Actually, so let me put this in one time. On November 30th, we have something called Brothers by the Bonfire. It's a all you can eat and drink event. It's 250 for the entrance, but we only have room for 100 men. But it's an opportunity for men to come and really talk about their issues in a way that we don't really normally talk. And it's an opportunity, there are going to be four persons on the panel. I would be one. We'd have a psychologist, a nutritionist, and we're going to talk about, so we had a survey out, and, the four biggest topics, we might only have room time to talk about three, was mental health, purpose and financial stability, um, relationship with women, and there was one other thing. Um, I think one is purpose and the other one is financial stability, right? So we want to talk about some of those things and give men an opportunity to really say what they truly feel, because we are in a situation now where the minute a man opens his mouth, you know, he's a target for saying what he truly feels or saying what he thinks should happen. And there's now this huge imbalance where men's words are now weaponized. So I could say to you, don't go there, and you can't tell me what to do. You understand? And those are some of the situations that I think our parents didn't have to deal with. I think there has been a huge disconnect from, I would say, like, women in my mother's generation to the women that we have now. And so, there's a thing where in the Bible where they say the older women should teach the younger ones. And I think a lot of that is not happening. And a lot of that is translating to some issues where men now feel like, well, damn, I have no opportunity or no option to say anything here. And now, the minute a man raises his voice or he says anything, it's like abuse, right? So we have to be very, very careful, when we throw around the word abuse, right? The thing about it is that I think there's a situation where men do not feel regarded and respected. And there's a lot of that happening, and people are doing like it's not existent. And that's why I come back to the whole point of, we spoke about Happy International Men's Day, but most men would forego that day just have somebody say, "Hey, I love you and I respect you," and treat you with respect and regard. You'd prefer to have a day full of that than to have, people give you these platitudes of Happy International Men's Day, which really doesn't mean anything. Because at the end of the day, you really don't know what it is to be a man. And uh, what we regard, what we need, what we require, I think is poorly being handled. And so there's an opportunity for men to come and talk, and hopefully out of this we could have a movement of opening dialogue and opening, I would love to see a lot of these um, you know, empowerment sessions happen with men. And I mean these women empowerment, because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, we are not enemies, and I feel that there's a bigger and bigger divide happening between men and women that soon we will not be able to come back from, because I think that um especially with the older men, if you watch the divorce rate, and I'm telling you, you watch the divorce rate and you hear men say, frankly, I'm not going to get married again. I'm I'm not going to go through that again. It was too much stress. I've done all I could have done. I was, doing my very best, and it falls on deaf ears. There's a little video that I played, advertising this event, and the man asked about woman's intuition, and all the women in the room were like, yes, yes, it have such a thing as woman's intuition. And he said, so if woman's intuition could tell you about, him cheating, why can't woman, how come woman's intuition don't tell you that he's unhappy? And the fact that men are unhappy, especially in marital relationships, is going more and more unnoticed. And and that is something I believe really needs to be addressed.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Stephen. You want to say anything in closing?
In closing, guys, is I really, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think November 30th is going to be the beginning of something really great for men. Really try your best to come out there and be there and have a time where we could just really open up and say what we truly feel, because I think for far too long, we see men suffer, and it's now going to be a situation where we won't have these opportunities to grow together. You know, Men historically moved in a clan, and they moved together as one, right? And I think more and more what I'm seeing is a more competition is happening. So this man is trying to have the biggest car, the biggest this, the biggest whatever. And that's because, again, all the literature, all the stories are coming out. Everybody's trying to be Prince Charming, right? But we could all live in a castle if we work together. And I think that concept is quickly leaving us, and there's more and more pressure from society, the media, and I would say the feminist movement to compete, right? And if we understand that at the higher levels, right? Like, I give an example the other day that Sony supplies, all the talk we talk about Apple iPhone and Samsung, right? Samsung is better than Apple. Do you know that Samsung is the person who manufactures Apple's cameras in their phones? Everybody talks about how the iPhone cameras are so good. But at that level, they understand that collaboration is much better than competition. And we need as men to start back collaborating again for us to really be successful. Everybody trying to have the biggest house on the corner, but we all can have big houses on the corner if we all work together. So, guys, November 30th, Brothers by the Bonfire, come out and have the time of your life.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our interview on I Am Him Too. Our guest this evening was social entrepreneur, kingdom man, Mr. Stephen Edwards, my friend and my big brother. So I thank you very much for being part of this interview and being part of this process again. There's a plethora of information that was given. So for those who don't know, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can
What's
see
the YouTube channel?
right. The YouTube channel is Charismatic Akil Samuel, at Charismatic Akil Samuel. And you can follow me on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at ASEC5000, at ASEC number 5000. Right? Easy to follow us on all platforms. So thank you very much, my friend. God bless.
A pleasure being here, man.
All right. God bless and good night.
All right. God bless. Good night. See you November 30th.
Amen. All right, guys. That brings us to the end of the interview. So follow us on Facebook, follow us on IG, follow us on YouTube. Look out for more stuff. All right. God bless and good night.